Alright, so I want to show you guys something interesting today because it really plays around with the numbers and optimization inside of Pokemon Quest, and it could show that unevolved Pokemon are stronger than their evolved counterparts, because when you think about it, most of a Pokemon's power is going to be coming from the power charms. You put down the power charms, and that's going to be just absurd amounts of scaling compared to the Pokemon's original stats. Like Alakazam, look at this, 578, 1139. Well, through that, we're getting over 6 times more just from the amount of stones. So that means at maxed out stones, the amount of power difference between an evolved Pokemon and an unevolved Pokemon is going to be pretty low. But this is where things get a little fancy, and this is something that I realized recently. I was like, oh man, I just got the perfect Abra, and then my Abra evolved into an Alakazam, and I was like, wait a second, it's not so perfect anymore. So there's some really funny stuff that ends up happening inside this game. So here's one of the Alakazams I'm kind of working on. Attack of Psychic type moves, 20%. So with this right here, it's like, oh cool, we have a 20% boost to our Psychic type moves. Well, as an Abra, that actually comes out to a 30% boost. And then Kadabra is going to be 25. So what it shows is that the stats that you get are going to be higher on the unevolved Pokemon compared to the evolved Pokemon, which I thought was kind of weird, and I was wondering if there's math behind this that would support it. So even this, the Psychic type moves weight 20%. At an Alakazam, it becomes 10%, and at a Kadabra, it's 15. So I'm wondering is if the stat difference between a Kadabra and an Alakazam means that the 5% faster moves and the 5% faster damage actually translates to Kadabra being stronger than the Alakazam. So that's what this video is going to investigate, and I'm also going to try to go and get this Abra up to a high enough level because that's kind of where we are right now. Alright, perfect. I think we can actually get into some math right now. So what I ended up doing was I cooked 4 golden cooking pots. That way I could get a high level Abra. Even though I'm not making it competitive, I just want to get to level 100 to see what the level 100 Kadabra is worth. Now, one thing that people might be thinking is, well, why not Abra? Abra gets a higher bonuses than the Kadabra, so does that mean it has a chance of being stronger? Well, there's actually something really interesting and also problematic with the Abra. It doesn't get Psycho Cut or Psychic, so we're stuck with the Psy Wave, which is going to be less damage, which I think is not going to be enough to offset the higher bonuses that you find on the Abra. Also, Abra, it doesn't only get the plus 30% to Psychic type moves, it gets the plus 550 to attack. Now this one does have the 30%, but a plus 550 to attack actually puts us at about 1200 at level 100, which means the Abra has a higher attack than the Alakazam. So if it had the same access to moves, Abra would just straight up be stronger right there, and even then, I think the 30% is going to be much more mileage when you start putting in all the other damage. So that's what's kind of kickstarted this video, but now let's see what the Kadabra looks like, because I ended up getting this like level 97. So let's see if Kadabra at level 100 gets competitive, and then we can throw down the numbers and the math and the stuff like that. Alright, so I am wasting a little bit of time. Also, I want to keep an eye on the attack stat of this Abra, because as we saw, that other level 100 Abra had like plus 60 to the attack, so give or take a couple of stats, that's going to be a bit problematic. But look at that jump. So level 100 Kadabra ends up being at the, what is that, 837, potentially up to 900. So around 250 to 300 points less than the Alakazam. Is that actually going to be enough to make the difference when we get Kadabra low, or when we get all the theoretical slots and moves and points like that? Now this is where we have fun. This is where we do the math, and this is where I thrive in Pokemon research. And now it's time for the fun part, so place your bets, everybody. Who will win? Will it be Alakazam, the fully evolved powerhouse, rocking several hundred more attack points than the Kadabra, or will Kadabra find a way that despite being not fully evolved, the pre-evolution bonus that it receives, although slight, will it be enough to take over the Alakazam? Well, let's find out. So I'm trying to kind of phrase this in the ultimate late game perfect scenario. Now this does technically give the edge to Kadabra, but if your team or if your Pokemon is perfect, then that means we're going to kind of balance out those strengths. So I'm kind of averaging this out at around 950 power per Power Stone. Now 950 times 7, because I also want to do this in a pretty fair environment. What I've learned is that 2 health on the Alakazam is going to be about the best way of survivability versus damage. So that's going to give us an overall power of 6,650. Now do note, if you are comfortable with 1 or 0 health stones, then that means Kadabra is going to get stronger because the gap is going to shorten. So what we're pretty much doing is just giving 6,600 or 6,650 power to each of these Pokemon. And again, these stones could be even higher. You could have 970 stones as an average or something like that, so the power might change just a little bit. But again, we are aiming for the ultimate late game. So that's going to give Alakazam 7,789 attack, but then Kadabra only has 7,487. Is this difference going to be enough to offset the values? Well, again, now we get the moment of truth. So Alakazam, its overall power is going to be 7,789 multiplied by the 1.2, that 20% Psychic type attack bonus, giving us a damage value of 9,346. Well, Kadabra edges it out ever so slightly. So 7,447 with that 1.25, that 25% psychic boost will be slightly more damage. But there's a few things. Let's just kind of take this back just a bit, because there's a few things that could also make this even more powerful for the Kadabra. Because like I said, if we have any higher stones, or if we have an extra stone, then that means Kadabra is going to get even more multipliers on that, and then kind of edge out ahead with even more attack. But I also wanted to consider this from an IV standpoint, because what happens if we favor Kadabra? That this is the strongest Alakazam I have. The other Alakazam, it's like 1120 or something, but we already saw that there was the Abra at level 100 that had 60 points more than the Kadabra. So it seems like Kadabra's idealized IV value could be as high as 900, and Alakazam, if it's like 1150 or even 1200, that means there could be maybe slightly more points. So what if the difference between Kadabra and Alakazam is only 250? Well, again, that's going to be slightly more points in Kadabra's favor. That's then compounding into more stats. Also, we do have to factor in the bulk up. That pretty much the meta for the end game of Pokemon Quest is using Sharing Stones on a bulk up Pokemon, or at least having some kind of offensive boosting. That way you can do insane amounts of damage. So we do have to consider that this 75% bulk up boost is going to add into the stats. So that means we're just getting those little bits of advantages. That means that 93.58 gets slightly more ahead than that 93.46. Also, again, if we're getting those extra 50 points compared to the Alakazam at max IVs in a perfect scenario, as well as the other 100 points that we could potentially getting from the Power Stones, it's going to make Kadabra edge out even more, and that's not even counting the extra 5% cooldown that we get with the Alakazam. But that is not the end of the story, because there's one thing that we are really not fully considering potentially, and that is the auto attack. So what I'm feeling like is if we're running our Alakazam like this, in theory, that's just kind of like we have 1 wide, and then we have 2 cooldowns, or like move wait times. That means the wait time 5% bonus that we're getting on Kadabra isn't going to be as noticeable, since that means we're like pretty much comparing, I don't know what this is going to be, like a 40 to a 45% wait time reduction. But that also means, since we are going for move wait time down, the auto attacks aren't going to be as frequent. But even factoring the auto attacks, I want to give the edge ever so slightly to Kadabra, because what I feel like is it's only going to be a couple 100-point difference on an auto attack, and the auto attack is like, you know, you get 3 or like 4 auto attacks per 3 actual attacks. I think the Psycho Cut is going to be doing roughly 500 to 1,000 damage more. However, this is where I need to update the video, because I made a pretty big mistake. When I started the video, it was under the assumption that Kadabra gets access to the Psycho Cut, but I got it confused, and only Alakazam gets access to Psycho Cut. So this kind of like messes with a little bit of the math, because Alakazam just straight up gets a better move that does more damage. However, there is still the Psychic versus Psycho Cut debate, which I will cover in a later video, but I personally prefer the Psycho Cut, so Alakazam is going to be better in that situation. But for the people that favor Psychic, it shows that Kadabra is going to be the better choice. So I don't think this video is completely invalid because of that. Also, it's still something to consider that depending on the move bonuses that unevolved Pokemon get, it could still be better for those Pokemon than evolving them. Whereas the auto attacks are going to be like 200 damage more. So I think the Kadabra DPS is actually going to be higher than the Alakazam, just off of that 5% cooldown reduction and the 5% damage reduction as well. So I think that's some pretty interesting stuff, but it's also kind of trying to think about it for other Pokemon. What other Pokemon that have 2 and 3 stage could benefit from this? I think there's actually too much of a power difference between Dragonite and Dragonair. Also, I don't think Dragonair gets Draco Meteor, but Dragonite does. So you have to be like really specific about this. However, Alakazam, it's one of the easiest, most powerful Pokemon to get in the game, especially farming it for those high levels. All we have to do is cook. So yeah, if you have 60 of the Blackberries and then 40 of the Apricorns, you have a level 70 to level 100 Abra that's just ready to go right there. And even then, making the smaller, or getting lower level Abras and then using that for training is still going to be very effective, which is why I have so many Abras right here. So at the very least, depending on which Pokemon you're training, what evolutionary bonuses they could have. Like I said, Abra would actually be as strong as the Alakazam and then have potentially better bonuses. That would get better move weight down, but also a higher attack and a higher psychic damage boost if only it had the same moves. So look for Pokemon with similar move sets and also damage that can be offset and kind of done that way. I actually might try another video with this, Rhydon versus Rhyhorn. I'm wondering if the crunch on the Rhyhorn or something like that could be comparable to the Rhydon damage if we do get the proper move damage buff. So there we go, guys. The unpopular opinion, the off-meta thought being proven to have some viability to it, which means that this game has a bit more depth than we thought. Because when I first saw Abra, I was like, oh, cool, 30%. And then when I saw 20% on my Alakazam, that's the little spark that got this going. So I want to see if this can be pushed any further, and also how much more effective it can be on other Pokemon. But since it is super easy to get the Abra, to get the Alakazam, and stuff like that, that is something to consider. And now I got to kind of remake my team, so we're going to see how that works for future walkthroughs and playthroughs as well. So guys, enjoyed this video. Don't forget to leave a like, comment down below your thoughts, share it with your friends if you want to teach them stuff about Pokemon Go. That's kind of it. So guys, enjoy the video. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.